All right. Hello, everyone. This is going to be episode 2 of a little new series called the Bandmasters Podcast Sidenote series. And the intention of this is to hopefully provide you with some information and motivation of things that you could do right now as a artist or musician at home. So I am broadcasting live or pre-recorded, whatever you want to say, from my basement right now, if you couldn't tell by the rafters there. And we've got 2 guests with us today that very excited to have. And my one guest is Mr. Stephen Pyter, who's our choir director over at Joliet Central High School and also a recently published composer. Hi, Steve.
Hello, sir. Hello, gentlemen. Jermaine wins for coolest background.
And then we also have Jermaine Stegall, who is a Joliet Central alum and is a composer out in LA right now. And Jermaine, we've of course worked together earlier this year when you wrote a piece for the Joliet Central band. So, and both of you, I should say, were on our concert back on November 17th. We had Steve's piece Tempus Modus available at all major music publishing.
Thank you for the plug.
Yeah,
he wins for being published and available.
I just happened to have.
Look at that.
Well, gentlemen, thanks again for agreeing to record with me here. And I prepped both of you for this interview, or maybe I didn't prep you. And I basically said the goal of this is I'm hoping after we get done with this is that people could kind of hear about your composition process, and maybe if they are so inclined at home to maybe dabble in composing a little bit, or at least understand what it might take to compose. So, Steve, if you wouldn't mind if we started with you. And again, my big question is how do you compose music? But let's start actually a little bit more so with how did you start composing music and when?
I heard Julie Giroux speak at Midwest this last December, and she was talking about how when she started, she had to make her own paper. And I did the same thing, but the difference was she, with the paper she made, she wrote pieces that every publisher wanted to publish. And I presented it to like grandma on like DuckTales paper that eventually probably got, I don't know, used for wastebasket liner or something like that. But I started doing arranging first. So I was big into high school band, and I started arranging for solo and then brass quintet, eventually bands. A lot of time in college I spent in computer labs playing around with and learning Finale and eventually Sibelius, which I still use now.
So let me interrupt you. I'm sorry. Because, and this is why I'm so glad I'm talking to you two, because my original intention was let's get people maybe composing. And then the first thing you go to is you say arranging, which makes more sense. Yep. So can you tell maybe somebody listening that hasn't done this before, can you tell someone what arranging is?
It's just taking music that already exists and changing who it's being played for. So maybe taking a piece of piano music, something by Debussy, and arranging it for brass quintet.
Okay. And you and would you think that maybe would be a good place for somebody that wants to dabble in composing to start with?
I think studying music in general, getting little miniature Dover scores, things like that, and just looking at what other people do is great. And then, not having to have the idea in your head, having somebody else's idea that you can play with is a nice jumping off point, especially when you're just getting started, because the blank page can be so scary. That's often the hardest part, right? So if you let somebody else give you the idea and then you're focusing more on craft, you can start to play with some things with a little less pressure of having to come up with every single note on your own.
So let's go to the blank page then, and I'd love it if we could actually maybe touch on arranging a little bit later from both of you. But as you said, you dabble in some arranging. Where does the composition part come in?
In the arranging process, or when did I start?
I'm sorry, for you, when do you start composing?
I started composing in college, and I wrote a lot for years, and honestly didn't really. I never sent anything out there, and it was mostly because I was just terrified and never thought that anything was ready for anybody else to hear. So I would start a project and work on it, and sometimes get real close to feeling like I was done, and just go, that's not ready. I'm going to put that on the shelf for a little while. And I did that for years, and eventually sent a couple of things out to publishers, and got no's back. And within the last year, I submitted a couple of new things and a few things that I had gone back and tweaked. And within about a month's time, I got responses back from publishers that they were interested in picking up all 6 submissions that I had submitted last summer. So, but that took me a long time to get to a point where I felt even comfortable sending my stuff out. So,
And just so everybody out there knows too, I think it's great I'm talking with both of you because Steve, you primarily focus on concert band music, correct?
yeah, I like, basically concert music is great for me because my full-time job is teaching, and so I don't have tons of free time throughout the school year. So when I have a little bit of a break and I just have some leisure time to sit down and write, I can do that. And I'm not racing against any kind of deadlines, which I'm sure Jermaine does frequently. So I generally can work pretty autonomously and at my own leisure, and I don't have to collaborate really with anybody else. I haven't done any commissions or anything like that yet. So it's just me at my convenience, which is probably totally different from what Jermaine is doing.
Sure. And I want to come back to later on the kind of how, like we can maybe help people at the end, maybe take that first step into what they want to do with this. Jermaine, same question there. And in fact, how, same thing. How do we get into composing and maybe a little brief history of you and how you started everything?
I think Steven I'm glad that he said that because I probably wouldn't have. It's like I wish I'd have thought of that arranging idea because I think if someone like, to be honest, Quincy Jones and John Williams come to mind as 2 people that did a ton. I mean, John Williams, most people know his work in film and television composing, mostly film. But I think where it's a known thing for folks that are fans of his. They know that he was in the I believe it was the Army Band, and was an arranger. Like he was a staff arranger for either the Army Band or the Marine Band for years and years. He was in the military, is where he kind of developed the chops to work quickly and to work, in many different kinds of the large scale form, in terms of a giant group, that he'd be playing for or writing for, and arranging was a thing that he did. He wasn't writing original compositions for them. And then also, of course, Quincy Jones with a lot of the jazz, the background that he had, being someone that was a arranger, that was definitely something that I always knew in the back of my mind is probably a good idea to consider that. And to be honest, around the time that I started wanting to actually get interested in film music, around 1995, specifically, which was the year I went to college, as a freshman, I started to lost my train of thought. It had something to do with arranging, though. What was I gonna say?
While you gather that thought, can I just
I know.
Can you up? Oh, go ahead.
It had to do with being an orchestrator, and which is similar to arranging, although you're taking someone's composition and you're not deciding, to play it in different instruments. And in most cases, when someone's, written it, let's say, I know I'm kind of all over the map, but in the 80s or 90s, where most composers for film and television would write their compositions on, let's say, 12 or 16 lines of staff paper, that would be given to an orchestrator because it takes twice as or 3 or 4 times as long to explode that out into an entire score paper for the entire band. So an orchestrator in some cases might take the liberty of doing, what I now think to do anyway when I'm writing, which is, take the violas and add it to the bassoons, or understand that a solo cello line works with French horn and things like that. Sometimes liberties can be taken in that. And that's obviously, as a composer, which is why I'm saying this, is where you can kind of learn how different families of instruments work together, as an arranger. And with, and again, jazz band, I would say, in high school would be a good opportunity to dabble in that. Number one, you don't have such a giant ensemble to tackle. I was encouraged when I first got into college and started letting professors know that I was interested in composition to try to, and it sounded crazy and to me, because I wanted to write for full orchestras day one, start writing for a solo instrument, solo flute, solo cello, instruments that can't even play two notes at one time, monophonically, just write an entire piece. And I've done this a couple times where it's like, say it's a saxophone piece or solo flute piece, and there's no accompaniment. It's just, can you develop an idea that sustains the ear for a couple minutes and actually tells a musical story of some sort without all the tricks and, now we're going to repeat it in this section of the group or whatever. So I would say, writing solo pieces, and I know I jumped all over, but that's something to consider. Writing for your own instrument, for all the folks that are in high school band, write a solo, like an etude, or a series of etudes. Try, and again, I'm all over. I'm thinking, as an experiment, assuming that you might come back before the school year's over. Coming up with a book of 10 or 16 etudes, do one every 2 weeks or one every week or something like that. A minute of music per week or per day. I don't know. Just something that's sustainable, something you can actually do, like you said, writing full symphonies by the end of, this quarantine period. I don't know if this is what this is geared toward, but this downtime that the country has, but getting your creative juices flowing is, a step one. And again, like, I know that was all over the map. But.
No, I appreciate that. I think there were some good things there too that I didn't think about also, which is, as you were saying, write for your instrument. It doesn't have to be a lot of music either.
Yeah.
It could be 8 bars a day, maybe. It could be 4 bars. Steve, you were going to jump in with something.
Well, the two thoughts that I had, I don't think you're all over the map at all, Jermaine. I thought that was great. Two things would be, one, start with what you know. So, as a trumpet player in high school, the first things sometimes that I was trying to write, I shouldn't have been trying to write for. If you're a trumpet player, don't write a double woodwind quintet right out of the gate. Write a trumpet solo.
If you are a double woodwind player, don't write for a double woodwind.
Yeah, there you go. Right, but start small. I attended another workshop at Midwest a few years back. It was Juilliard '96, and it was all those guys that had started at Juilliard together the same year: Whitaker, Mackey, Jonathan Newman, and Steve Bryan. And Whitaker gave a really cool idea there, and it was about starting a project is always exciting, but finishing a project is really hard. So when you're starting, give yourself very narrow parameters. Say you're not going to allow the composition to last any longer than 60 seconds, and you're not going to use any more than 5 notes, and let that be your guide. Yeah, and just start there so that you get used to the process of the whole process of starting something and getting to the end. And then from there you expand, but give yourself narrow parameters to start, and start with what you know.
It sounds like everything we learned also in English or math class too, which in math class, you're restricted to a specific formula. And in English class, if you're writing a paper, here's your topic, here's your outline. It has to be 3 pages. You have to have topic sentences, main ideas, supporting facts, things like that. And so then my question would be, is that as artists, I'm sure a lot of us say, or maybe people that aren't artists think, oh, everything's just free and you do whatever you want. But where, Steve, you're saying kind of, put some parameters in place. What maybe are some other parameters? So you talked about length, you talked about instruments, would maybe a certain key be a parameter? modes, things like that. Do you think the more parameters that you put in place, the easier it might be for a beginning composer?
For me, I think it comes back to starting with what you know. So if you're not highly skilled in music theory, trying to do something in Phrygian is probably not the place to start. But if you can play a major scale, yeah, but if you can play a major scale, start there, and over time, you study and you learn some things and you add more tools to the box. But I would just say starting simple. So if for me as a really lousy piano player, talking about keys, anything that I would have and anything that I kind of still start with starts in C. I'm not playing it in G flat because it's just too hard for me. And then I get tied up in the mechanics of it, and you lose the creative juice. So, know your technical limits and start there.
Jermaine, what are some things that either you notice with yourself in the past or with other younger composers? What were some maybe weaknesses or just common mistakes that you see composers make?
I'll tell you right now, writing too many notes. I mean, that whole too many notes joke of Amadeus, it's so true. I mean, of course, writing additional music for composers out here has been one of the things that's helped me not only, find opportunities to write music and get compensated for it, but also to get feedback from veterans that are doing it on what works well, what they, might think. And then also, of course, they're going to send this off to, higher ups and get feedback. But knowing that a lot of the time starting off before, I got to the point where I'm at now, a lot of it would have to do with, okay, you got so many ideas in here. There's some great ideas. Let's pick one and make it a better idea, a stronger idea, and then actually flush that out. And that there's a certain level of coherence that comes with the cue or a small piece of music with a greater context of a score, or a composition, and also I've had several. I mean, I would say from the early days. I would say I started around officially around 97, 98 composing music, and by the time I got to graduate school, which is in University of North Texas in 2000, I started dabbling because it's such a big jazz school and writing for jazz bands, because that's the model. That's the thing. That's what everyone wants to get to the 1 o'clock lab band and have a piece on the 1 o'clock lab band album and play in the band and just have that whole magical trifecta happen. And some people were known to have gotten things read by the 1 o'clock, and also all the lab bands are reading charts all the time. But I do remember as I was starting out writing for jazz bands there, because I didn't really compose original music for jazz band before I got to graduate school. When I got there was a common thread of just too many ideas, and not sticking with something long enough to give someone to grab onto. And with songwriting, I don't know if you're going to talk a lot about songwriting or pop music, but obviously the hook or the chorus, is what we're hammering home so that people are singing it, in their heads, or that's the story that you're telling. It's about that hook, that melody. And if you've got 6 different main melodies, no, I don't even know how the record business works at all, but I have a strong feeling that your record not going to get played on the radio or in shopping malls or anywhere that you would hope that would get played if it's got 6 melodies going on at different times. It doesn't really tell a cohesive story. Even within the course of 3 minutes, you want to give someone to chew on that is a thing. And I would say, a piece of advice is, don't worry. Like, if you have all these ideas, great. That's another song. Write that other song thing. Like, you don't have to get every idea ever out in the 1 or 2 songs that you think you might write in your career. Like, this is, composing music is, of course, an art form, and something that it obviously can be done well into your, in a wheelchair or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not something that it's going to go away. Like there's somehow we've had a lot of original music from the beginning of time or the beginning of sound recordings or the history of composition as we know it up till now. There have been new things happening all the time with the 12 notes that we have. You know, it's not necessary to cram all that into a couple pieces.
It's funny you say that because, and I like talking with you too, because I am not a composer or arranger at all. And after talking with you guys, I'll try to do something.
Yeah.
But I know with me, at least, every time I sit down and I write something, I say, man, this sounds awesome. And I said, oh, I just wrote Don't Stop Believing. You know, and that's just kind of where my mind always goes with that. Well, a couple more questions then here. You know, the first one would be as we're kind of, you know, trying to, this is for anybody that wants to listen to it, but especially, you know, music students. And we're thinking, you know, mainly junior high school, college students there. Let's maybe get a few composer or song recommendations if you wouldn't mind. And maybe Jermaine, you could go first, but maybe somebody that's looking at, you know, composing, either composer or song recommendations, or maybe things that inspired you in the past that just come to mind right away, that someone could, maybe they're not going to compose, but they're going to go listen to these things and maybe appreciate it on a different level.
Man, it's hard because, you know, my mind goes straight to film composers.
Well, and I know your story a little bit, where you have told me before that your family went to the movies weekly when you were younger.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Sometimes twice a week. And in the summers, and I would say in the early to late 80s, not so much in the 90s, it started dying off, but we used to go to the drive-in theater as well.
Okay.
There'd be a point where sometimes it was like you can get 3 feature films in for the weekend, or 4 if we went to the drive-in, saw 2 movies, and then went on Sunday and saw something. It was
So what's a piece maybe that you think is going to stick with you forever? You're never going to forget.
Yeah,
this piece.
There's a lot. You know, it was funny. I was watching a movie that might be inappropriate to recommend, but the movie Stripes. You ever see that with Bill Murray?
Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, yeah.
Elmer Bernstein did that score, and I remember watching, you know, that, and then thinking, you know, I didn't get it back then, but like, there's all these themes that Elmer's using that really clearly explain the story of, you know, this character that's kind of down on his luck in the beginning, and by the time you get to the military stuff in the movie, there's these full-on military marches that sound so grandiose, and like, you know, they have just like goodwill behind them. You just want to stick your chest out. There's almost like this patriotism behind it, and you don't even know why you're feeling that way. Elmer Bernstein, I'll throw him out there. Of course, John Williams is not only my favorite, he's probably one of the most popular composers to ever live. So there's like a wellspring of pieces that you could, you know, tumble down the rabbit hole of just finding things that you didn't know, you know, 80s scores that he was writing, you know, that no one saw the movie or whatever, you know, even, I mean, early 80s scores. There's one, I can't even remember the names. Some of these is obscure stuff. I have a record collection behind this camera of things that I just found of his, just because I felt like I needed to try at some point to try to have his entire collection of the obscure stuff. I'm trying to think of, I don't know, classical composers. I mean, Aaron Copland.
And even pop music is fine too.
Pop music, look, I'm gonna throw out a couple of things that I think are like staples, like the Beatles. Like, it's just and we talk about this all the time, like almost every genre of music, like, it's, you know, folks are constantly talking about how some of the greatest songwriters, craftsmen of all time, and I didn't discover them fully until probably about 10 or so years ago. There was a point where, like, there's a movie that was in theaters, and like my wife's dad is a huge fan, and we got him I think it was the White Book. There was something that was happening where it was like a lot of Beatles was circulating. I started.
Was it the Across the Universe movie?
Yeah, that was the movie. That was
okay.
Around whatever year that was. Is the year I kind of stumbled down the rabbit hole of listening to how they would take very simple melodies and they would be shifting harmonies, and they would do things with mixed meter all the time that you wouldn't think to do, and it sounded inevitable every time. Like, and I know that some of that stuff is, of course, genius. You can't really explain some of that stuff, but some of it is also working and reworking an idea until it does sound like it was supposed to be that way. John Williams talks about coming back to pieces that he's written a week before and reworking it over and over and over again, which inspires me to know that not everything has to be this amazing, brilliant idea that comes out. The first version of it is the version that's going to, like, people are going to be singing this and crying. Sometimes things need to be developed over time.
Mr. Pyter, what recommendations do you have? Some suggested Stephen Pyter listening.
I mean, I don't know that there's anybody in particular that I would say, if you want to learn to be a composer, listen to this person. I think some of the best advice I've gotten is try to listen to a lot of different music of a lot of different styles, and find what speaks to you. And so when I try to write, particularly when I'm stuck, sometimes the thing I have to think is what creates an emotional response in me? What's the music that I'm most passionate about? And then not trying to copy or mimic those people, but thinking about what is it about that music that I find inspiring, and what can I take from that and incorporate into my own voice. And man, John Williams is right up there. I had the chance, I've not met him, but just seeing him conduct his own music in concert a couple of times, and at Orchestra Hall in Chicago 2 years ago, seeing him come out, and when he starts that Superman march, I mean, and I am not in the best physical shape. I think I can fly, right? And so within just a couple of notes, you just are transported to this place and this feeling, and that's what I look for. If I'm trying to create a certain emotional character or feeling, I try to find music that creates that for me. And that can be, totally different depending on the mood. But what I love about Williams, is his stuff is just obviously so iconic, but his tunes are awesome. And I personally love music that has melody. That there's minimalist music and all sorts of music, that is inspiring, but something that has a nice tune, and that can be developed, is, I find, beautiful. And one thing I try to do, Jermaine, you mentioned this earlier. Sometimes you have to boil your ideas down, and you might have 6 great ideas, and you just have to focus it in. And so I'll try to think about maybe one tune, but give myself an exercise of writing 5 short variations on that tune. Doesn't have to be harmonized, but just finding ways to, in rhythm, maybe in mode, in some way, just turning it on its side, inverting it, coming up with ways to expand on and develop a particular theme. And I think that's one of the things that Williams does, incredibly well. And I love pop music. I love Motown. So like I just watched a documentary on HBO about the whole process of how Gordy built that company and what it became, and just the process of how they would write a song and create an artist, and the tunes that they came up with, are iconic. And so there's lots of music from all different kinds of genres that I find inspiring.
It's funny.
One thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Just in case anyone hasn't seen it, everyone has Netflix, but I think it's called Q documentary that's on Netflix. I think or Quincy. It's about Quincy Jones's life. One of the reasons I think that is so important is it covers so many decades of music as we know it in this country, and then also his depth of it's just very comprehensive, showing his early beginnings, how he and why, emotions and feelings, like why, in terms of being an artist, how that connected to his artistry and also going abroad and studying with different folks in the world, and leading bands in different parts of the world that led him to arranging and also overseeing parts of music business, which also influenced the way he thought about actually approaching writing. Arranging was so huge for him, but also being his own artist with his own solo albums was like a whole thing. At a certain point, he didn't even, it's like he didn't even think that that was a thing that he should do, but like all of a sudden he was doing it, and then back to doing this other thing, and now he's doing, like, whether it be magazines or TV show producing. Like, it's so comprehensive and touching so many different facets of the music industry and culture as we know it. Highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the great thing about these recommendations too is that now we actually have the time to focus our attention completely towards that. And one of the things I'll always recommend to my kids at school is sit down, put some headphones on, and listen to an album uninterrupted. And of course you get the responses that you think, which is, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I've got this going on, I've got this activity, and now potentially we have time for that. And
For a while.
yeah, for a while. And Steve, going back to what you were saying, where it's like John Williams plays the Superman theme and you think you're flying there. I think that is absolutely.
And I put on my blue spandex suit. I mean, I close my eyes and pretend.
But it really is. It shows the power of just good art form and what it can do for people. So I think then this kind of, to wrap this up, what I'd love to hear is maybe what's kind of the do now part of this. And here's what I took from today. Here's what I think, talking to both of you, that music students or musicians could do right now to put something like this in place. And both of you make money making music. We're not necessarily trying to make more. We're not trying to make more, published band composers or Hollywood composers necessarily, but we're trying to, expand our musical experiences and maybe get some people dabbling in this. But what I took from this today, something that people could do right now, if they've got an instrument at home, they could maybe find a Beatles tune or another tune that they like and work that tune out on their instrument. That would probably be a worthwhile activity to do. If they have a piano at home, they could plunk out a tune and maybe, as both of you were saying, get some parameters around that. I'm going to make a tune with 4 notes, and that's it. What are maybe some other things that either one of you could think about that someone could do right now? They're not going to write a symphony, but maybe they could get this program or do something.
One thing on my phone, which I don't even know if you're going to be able to see this, but of course, I'm working on this. Well, was working until we came to a screeching halt. It's Coming to America. There's a lot of ideas on my phone. I'm going to see if you can see this. But a lot of these are just called new recording.
I've got a list of those.
This is a reason for feeling like I don't want anyone to know what it is that I'm working on if they're
Sure.
working on my phone. But you got to be getting ideas, figure out what's going to help you get it out quickly.
Okay.
A lot of these aren't me. I mean, my keyboard's here. Like sometimes
he's flexing this office. Look at that.
What's that?
I said you're flexing your office there.
Oh, no. But so I have this here. A lot of the times in my sequencer is over here. I don't even, go to that when I'm actually trying to come up with something that's going to be good right away.
Sure.
Like I want to actually figure it out. And like you're saying, Steve, sometimes the limitations of what you can do on keyboard, they rear their heads. But you can at least get something out quickly. Like in here, I have like a hard recording of something that maybe it was like stuck in my head or is the nucleus for the real idea that's going to come later. And you can work it out or get parts of it out and listen to that recording immediately, like it's here. You can listen to it on your phone at night before you sleep. In the morning,
and if you don't have an instrument, you can even just take. So you're saying if you've got an iPhone, you can whistle. Okay.
I'm whistling. Sometimes I'm tapping. Like there's a lot of percussion in this movie that I'm doing. Sometimes I just want to get a rhythm out quickly.
Sure.
Just tap it out, like, and I can sequence and program, get it all right, and quantize it so it's neat. But sometimes I need to get the gist of the idea out as quick as I can. So having a sequencer isn't always. I mean, I think for students in school, if you don't have Finale or Sibelius or Ableton, most people have a phone. And I don't know how advanced they are with writing on 5 lines or writing melodies out, but paper and a phone like can get something out that is like copyrightable material that's yours, that you own. It's something that you created, and no one can take that away from you.
Great. Steve, what do you think?
I would just say that the first thing is just start somewhere. Even if you're not feeling incredibly inspired, sometimes you just start putting things on paper and the inspiration can come as you go. The development process, for me, I personally just work slowly. And so don't get discouraged if you feel like you get to a point where you hit a wall. It's okay to just walk away. And come back. A lot of the time when I walk away,
that's a song lyric right there. It's okay to just walk away. That's my contribution.
Hey, all right, there you go. But just walk away. Now I'm starting to hear it in my head. It's the corniest tune.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I already copywrote it, copyrighted it.
Okay, all right. But yeah, just walk away. And a lot of the time, what I'll do is if I'm working on something at my computer, I'll save an MP3 of it and just upload it into Google Drive. So I've got it on my phone, and I'll go for a walk or just sit on the couch with it and just let it stew for a while. I love Aaron Sorkin. For those of you that don't know him, he's a writer. He wrote Social Network, West Wing, the TV show, American President, lots of great stuff. And he has said, I love this quote, that his writing process a lot of the time looks like watching ESPN. And I am not at all an athletic person, but I can identify with sometimes walking away from an idea for a while is more productive for me. Just giving it a little bit of breathing room and thinking. And I used to get really frustrated when I would get stuck. And now I look at those places where I'm stuck and I actually get excited by the challenge of the creative process of how to get through it and move on to the next thing. And the last part is just finish something, whether it's a 4-bar tune or a 4-minute work. Start small, but just get it done. Again, I don't know where I heard it, but I saw something about writing, and it was, you don't know how many people in Hollywood have 75% of a screenplay written. And it's everybody's got 75% of a screenplay. Just finish it, even if you're not really happy with it. Just getting through that process and feeling like you can get to the end of something, and then getting it out there for feedback and letting some people who you think will be honest with you and constructive, get it out there. Don't be afraid to let other people in on what you're doing and help you get it to a place where you feel comfortable saying, okay, that's done. I can check that box. It's done.
Excellent.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The Masterclass series. In this, if anyone has an inkling to watch folks that are creative talk about their process, what a wonderful rabbit hole to tumble down. Because when you said Aaron Sorkin, it reminded me of that, because he has a masterclass and he talks about his process of getting ideas out.
So does Quincy Jones, doesn't he?
Quincy. Well, I know Herbie Hancock has
one. Hancock has one. Hans Zimmer has one.
Hans Zimmer. There's a lot of. I mean, the ones that are writers, like, it's just so cool to see them talk about being creative. There's even cooking ones that I haven't gotten to, but when I discovered this thing, like, wow, they really go deep into their process of getting these things out and making mistakes and not, being okay, finding a safe place to make these mistakes so you can get the idea out. I don't work for them. I don't know why I plugged that, but when you said Aaron Sorkin, I thought about that because I was like, that guy is brilliant. Bob Iger, head of Disney, he's got one on there.
Yeah, and
Correct.
Don, what you were saying about if you don't have this or you don't have that, just watching the trailer for Hans Zimmer's masterclass, which
Oh
again,
yeah.
I don't own stock or anything. He says, the next great idea is going to come from some kid with
Yeah.
an iPad.
Yeah.
So much of what used to be really sophisticated and rare is at your fingertips on a lot of things that we already have in front of us.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today and expertise. And anybody listening, like we said at the beginning, I hope you're inspired to do something creative and fulfilling with your musical lives during this time here. So, thanks
Hey,
again.
can I make a quick request?
Absolutely.
I'm listening to you two, and you both have these really nice radio voices. Can you
Yeah,
increase the low end on my voice so I don't sound like Mickey Mouse through this whole thing?
absolutely.
Because I hear
Absolutely.
Don and I
Oh,
hear
look at
Jermaine, and
that.
I'm like, okay, that's this
Post
thing.
production.
If you
What
can
if
do that, that'd be
I
great.
mess it up and it turns
that's
into a helium
I'll
voice?
tell you how to do it. Tell them, Don. You be yelling at your kids all day.
Yeah, you get that
I don't have
gravity.
them.
Here, I'll bring some over
I
after.
need some EQ. All right,
All
thanks,
right,
guys.
gentlemen. Good to see you both. Take
All right.
Good to
care.
see you guys too. Take care.
All right. Bye.